the plane that vanished without a trace. Welcome to the Dark History Case. Tonight, we uncover one of the greatest modern mysteries in aviation history. A story filled with confusion, secrecy, heartbreak, and unanswered questions. A story where a plane carrying 239 people vanished into the sky, and the world has never been able to explain how. This is the mystery of Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370. On the evening of March 8, 2014, Kuala Lumpur International Airport was quiet. Passengers arrived in the terminal carrying backpacks, suitcases, gifts, and hopes for the journey ahead. MH370 was a routine overnight flight from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, a path flown thousands of times before. For the passengers, it was just another trip. For the world, it would become a nightmare that remains unsolved. The aircraft was a Boeing 777, one of the safest and most reliable airplanes ever built. The captain was Zahari Ahmad Shah, a veteran pilot with more than 18,000 hours of flying experience. Co-pilot Fariq Abdul Hamid was young, skilled, and on one of his final training flights. The entire crew was trained, experienced, and highly trusted. At 12:41 a.m. H370 lifted off from the runway, rising into the night sky. The weather was calm. The climb was smooth. The plane followed its standard route northbound over the South China Sea. Nothing seemed unusual. At 1:07 a.m., the aircraft's ACARS system, which sends maintenance and location data, transmitted its final normal message. At 1:19 a.m., the cockpit sent its final known words. "Good night, Malaysian 370. These were normal departing words, calm and routine. Everything indicated a peaceful flight. 2 minutes later, at 1:21 a.m., MH370's transponder suddenly stopped broadcasting. It didn't send a distress call. No signs of a technical issue. No warnings. Just silence. The aircraft disappeared from civilian radar. But what the world didn't know, and what became one of the most important clues, was that military radar continued tracking the plane. And what it captured changed everything. Instead of flying straight toward China, MH370 made a sharp, deliberate turn to the left and flew back across Malaysia. Investigators later discovered that the turn was smooth and controlled, suggesting it was not a mechanical failure. Someone in the cockpit, or someone who gained control, appeared to be flying the plane manually. MH370 then flew over the Malay Peninsula, crossed the Strait of Malacca, and headed toward the Indian Ocean. The strange thing was that no one could understand why. Beijing was in the opposite direction. There was no weather issue. There was no military conflict. There was no emergency message. Nothing made sense. Air traffic control contacted MH370 repeatedly. No reply. Other aircraft tried to reach them. Silence. Chinese airports waited for the plane to appear on radar. It never did. By the time MH370 was officially declared missing, it had been hours since the last communication. Families waiting at Beijing Airport saw no plane, no crew, no passengers, only an empty gate and a growing sense of dread. Malaysia launched a search. Vietnam joined. China mobilized ships. 26 countries gathered airplanes, satellites, naval fleets, and detection systems. It became one of the largest search operations in aviation history. Yet there was nothing. Not a single piece of debris. As if the flight had simply disappeared into the night. Then came the biggest reveal, the clue that changed the direction of the investigation. Satellites from the British company Inmarsat showed that MH370 continued sending hourly handshake signals for nearly 7 hours after its disappearance from radar. This meant one shocking thing. The plane was still flying long after the world thought it had crashed. And its final signal placed it deep over the southern Indian Ocean, one of the most remote, dangerous, and empty stretches of water on the planet. By the end of part 1, the case already feels impossible. A plane vanished from radar, turned around without warning, flew for hours with no communication, and headed into one of the loneliest places on Earth. The radar trail, government silence, and the first impossible clues. When rescue teams realized MH370 was not in the South China Sea, confusion turned into crisis. Governments around the world demanded answers. China wanted updates. Malaysia held press briefings, filled with contradictions. Families begged officials to tell them the truth. But no one knew what happened, or perhaps some knew and chose not to reveal it. The most disturbing detail emerged when Malaysia's military finally admitted it had tracked the missing plane on military radar. This information was not released for several days, and when it came out, it stunned the world. MH370 had turned sharply left, crossed the Malay Peninsula, and flown over the Strait of Malacca. It didn't look like a plane in distress. It looked like a plane following a programmed route, or deliberately controlled by someone who understood aviation. Investigators reconstructed the radar path. The plane ascended, descended, and even changed speed movements, consistent with manual piloting. This was not a silent, drifting aircraft. It was being guided. The question was simple. By who? At this point, 3 possibilities emerged: the pilot, the co-pilot, or an unknown individual inside the cockpit. But none of the answers came easily. The captain, Zaharia Ahmad Shah, had a clean record, respected career, and stable life. Yet investigators later found a simulated flight path on his home flight simulator that ended in the remote Indian Ocean. Some argued it was a practice route. Others believed it was coincidence. But no official conclusion was ever made. The co-pilot was young, with no history of instability. He was days away from completing his final training flights. Nothing in his background suggested he would sabotage a plane. As for the passengers, there was no evidence of hijackers, no distress message, no struggle recorded by radar or communications. The plane showed no signs of sudden cabin breach. It simply changed direction. And then the timeline became even more puzzling. After leaving Malaysian airspace, MH370 flew northwest, toward the island of Penang. Some investigators believe the plane circled Penang briefly, as if someone on board wanted one last look at their hometown. Was it the captain? Or someone else? Then the plane turned again and headed out over the open ocean. When MH370 reached the end of Malaysia's radar coverage, it entered what aviators call a dark zone. No radar, no eyes, just ocean. But the plane wasn't invisible. It was quietly sending handshake signals to an Inmarsat satellite every hour. These signals weren't location data, they were more like digital pings, proof the plane was still powered on and operational. Each ping carried mathematical information called the Doppler shift, which could estimate the aircraft's distance from the satellite. By analyzing these shifts, scientists discovered something incredible. MH370 followed one of 2 possible paths: a northern route into Central Asia, a southern route deep into the Indian Ocean. The northern path crossed heavily monitored airspace. No nation reported an unidentified aircraft. Therefore, the southern route became the most likely possibility. If true, MH370 flew until fuel was exhausted nearly 7 hours after disappearing from radar. But why would a plane fly thousands of kilometers into an empty ocean with no communication? Was it an accident? Was it sabotage? Was it hijacking? Or was it something no one has yet understood? What made things harder was the strange behavior of Malaysia's government. Officials initially claimed the plane's last known location was over the South China Sea. Then they denied radar data. Then they admitted it. Then they contradicted themselves again. Families of the passengers accused the authorities of hiding the truth. Some believed governments knew more than they revealed. Some believed multiple nations had satellite data but refused to release it. The story became a web of confusion, but one fact remained undeniable. MH370 did not disappear in the South China Sea. It made turns. It flew for hours. It traveled along a deliberate path toward the Indian Ocean, and this raised the most disturbing question. If the plane was being piloted after its disappearance, who was flying it, and what were they trying to do? In the early days of the search, military ships and aircraft scanned the wrong oceans. Time was wasted. Fuel evaporated. Hope faded. By the time search teams reached the southern Indian Ocean, the area was massive, bigger than most countries, and the ocean was fierce, with waves as tall as buildings. Searching for a single airplane was like searching for a needle in a black, endless desert. Weeks passed, then months, then years, and still no trace. Until one day, something washed ashore thousands of kilometers away. Debris, satellite secrets, and the ghost flight theory. Months after MH370 disappeared, hope was fading. Search ships scanned thousands of square kilometers. Underwater drones mapped the ocean floor. Sonar scans revealed nothing but darkness and silence. Then, more than 16 months later, a discovery shocked investigators. On July 29, 2015, a piece of aircraft wreckage washed ashore on Réunion Island, east of Madagascar, over 4,000 kilometers from the suspected crash zone. The object was a flaperon, a critical piece of a Boeing 777's wing. When French authorities examined it, they confirmed what the world feared. It belonged to MH370. The ocean had finally returned a fragment of truth. But the discovery raised more questions than answers. Experts expected debris to wash up somewhere, but not this far west. Ocean drift models predicted Malaysia, Indonesia, and Australia. Réunion Island was possible, but not likely. The discovery implied that MH370's final moments may not match earlier assumptions. It challenged the crash zone. It challenged the flight path. It challenged everything. Over the next few years, more debris appeared across the African coast and Indian Ocean islands, Mozambique, Madagascar, Tanzania, Mauritius, South Africa. Some pieces were confirmed as MH370, others were highly likely, but there was something unsettling about these pieces. Many showed fracture patterns consistent with a high-speed impact, suggesting the plane hit the water with enormous force. Some panels showed signs of catastrophic structural failure. One piece had the words, "No step," still visible, proving it was part of the wing structure. Some debris showed delamination, consistent with a violent crash. Yet investigators could not confirm one crucial detail. Did the plane crash in a controlled glide, or did it fall out of the sky? This difference matters. A controlled glide could mean a skilled pilot intentionally ditched the plane. A violent drop could mean sudden catastrophe, or the plane was flying empty, with no one left alive. This led to what investigators call the ghost flight theory. The ghost flight theory. Satellite data showed MH370 may have flown on autopilot for hours after losing contact. If the plane lost cabin pressure early in the flight, it's possible that the passengers lost consciousness within minutes, the crew was incapacitated, and the aircraft flew on silently until fuel exhaustion. This kind of tragedy had happened before, most famously with Helios Flight 522. But MH370's flight path was not straight. It involved multiple controlled turns. It involved altitude changes. It involved routes that required knowledge of aviation. A ghost flight cannot explain the initial movements of MH370. Someone was controlling the plane at least for the first hour after the transponder was disabled. After that, it is possible the aircraft continued on autopilot, unmanned. Possible, but not certain. Another disturbing detail emerged. The last satellite handshake, known as the seventh arc ping, suggested a rapid descent, possibly a spiraling dive, as the plane ran out of fuel. Some simulations show the plane may have entered a steep, uncontrolled drop. Others show a controlled glide, consistent with human input. Every answer contradicts another. Every theory solves one piece but breaks another. The satellite math puzzle. In Marsat's satellite data, the only reason we know MH370 flew for hours has its own mystery. The data was based on timing of pings, frequency shifts, mathematical curves, Doppler analysis. This unusual method had never before been used to locate a missing aircraft. It was experimental. Some experts trust it completely. Others believe the data is incomplete or possibly misinterpreted. But without this data, the plane could be anywhere, across thousands of kilometers. The families and their fight for truth. While governments argued, families of the missing lived a nightmare. Many believed they were being misled. Many believed vital details were withheld. Some families claimed their loved ones' phones rang days after the disappearance, not voicemail actual ringing. Telecom companies called this network searching. But families believed it was proof their loved ones were still alive during the early days. Relatives reported seeing their WhatsApp statuses as online. Others saw bank accounts accessed. None of these were ever confirmed by investigators. But the pain and confusion only grew. Another mystery. Cargo. MH370 carried a strange shipment. 4.5 tons of lithium-ion batteries listed incorrectly on documents. Lithium batteries can catch fire violently, but cockpit recordings and radar traces show no sign of distress. No emergency descent. No smoke reports. No diversion attempt. If a fire occurred, it would have caused chaos, not silence, and controlled turning. Again, another dead end. Another strange detail. The airline's delay. Malaysia Airlines waited hours before declaring the plane missing. Vietnam reported MH370 never crossed their airspace much earlier. Malaysia denied this. Later, they admitted it. Then retracted it. Then changed the timeline again. Every contradiction made the case darker. All theories, the hidden questions, and the ending that still haunts the world. With debris scattered across thousands of kilometers of ocean, with satellite data pointing to a lonely crash zone far from land, and with every clue raising new questions, investigators finally turned toward the most difficult part of the MH370 mystery. What really happened? And why? Theories divided into two major categories: explanations that are realistic, and explanations that are controversial but impossible to ignore. Let's investigate both. Realistic theory has shown. Pilot action. The most widely discussed theory centers on Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah. He was experienced, calm, and deeply knowledgeable of the Boeing 777. Investigators found a flight simulator on his computer that contained a route ending in the southern Indian Ocean, similar to where MH370 is believed to have crashed. To some, this was evidence. To others, it meant nothing. Supporters of this theory argue that Zahari switched off the transponder, performed the sharp turns, depressurized the cabin, and flew until fuel exhaustion. Those who reject this theory argue Zahari had no motive, he left no note, he had no signs of instability, and the simulator data wasn't a complete route, it was fragments. Even the FBI could not prove intention. This theory remains possible, but never confirmed. Realistic theory #2. Rapid depressurization. If the cabin lost pressure suddenly, everyone on board could lose consciousness within minutes. The aircraft would fly on autopilot until fuel exhausted. But if depressurization occurred, why would the plane turn around, fly across the peninsula, change altitude multiple times, continue for hours? Those movements require active control, not an empty cockpit. This theory answers some questions, but not the most important ones. Realistic theory. #3. Catastrophic mechanical failure. Some believe MH370 suffered a sudden mechanical event. Fire in the cargo hold, electrical failure, engine meltdown, oxygen system collapse. But no mayday call was ever sent. No emergency descent happened. No attempt to divert to the nearest airport, something pilots are trained to do immediately. For a fire or mechanical failure to silence both pilots and communications instantly, while still allowing controlled navigation, is nearly impossible. This theory collapses under its own contradictions. Realistic theory. #4. Hijacking. Could MH370 have been hijacked? Passengers were screened, and no extremist groups claimed responsibility. The cockpit door was secure. No distress signal was sent. But hijacking cannot be ruled out entirely. A hijacker could have forced the pilots to change course, disabled systems, flown into remote waters. Yet no group demanded ransom. No message was ever transmitted. No purpose was ever shown. This theory remains possible, but lacks evidence. Realistic theory. #5. Halo or hypoxia event. Some experts think the pilots became unconscious due to oxygen mask failure. The plane might then have flown as a ghost flight. But once again, the initial turns were too accurate, too controlled, too specific. Someone was flying MH370 for at least the first hour. Controversial theory cancelletuno. Military shootdown. Some believe MH370 was accidentally shot down during military exercises. Signs supporting this idea include heavy military activity in the South China Sea the night of the disappearance, immediate secrecy from multiple governments, delayed timeline releases, contradicting statements, no wreckage found for more than 16 months, radar data withheld for days. If the plane was shot down, authorities might have hidden the truth to avoid international conflict, misled search efforts, and classified sensitive information. But the lack of explosive fragments on debris makes this theory uncertain. Controversial theory. #2. Diego Garcia. Diego Garcia is a highly classified U.S. military base in the Indian Ocean. Some theorists believe MH370 was diverted toward the base, intercepted, or forced to land. Supporters point out MH370's trajectory bent toward the Indian Ocean. The base was within range. The U.S. military never released full radar info. The plane's disappearance aligns eerily with gaps in public radar maps. But no official evidence has ever supported this theory. Governments strongly deny it. Still, the mystery surrounding Diego Garcia keeps this theory alive. Controversial theory. #3. Cyber hijack or remote takeover. Boeing 777 aircraft have advanced digital systems. Some believe MH370 was remotely hijacked through hacking, malware, satellite override, or compromised communication systems. This theory suggests autopilot was overridden, pilots lost control, the plane was flown into the Indian Ocean. Many aviation experts deny this is possible. Others believe some governments possess technology that isn't publicly known. Controversial theory. Diasquator, secret cargo or intelligence operation. There were rumors that MH370 carried sensitive cargo, including advanced electronics, secret military equipment, or intelligence materials. Some believe the plane was targeted by a foreign agency. Some believe the cargo caused a critical event. Some believe governments knew more than they disclosed. But again, no official confirmation. Controversial theory. #5. A sudden, unexplainable event. The final and most mysterious theory suggests that MH370 encountered something unknown, sudden, catastrophic, and impossible to describe. Not supernatural, but not easily categorized. A phenomenon like rapid structural collapse, severe electromagnetic interference, unrecorded atmospheric event, instantaneous system failure. These ideas lack evidence, but exist because the known explanations fail to cover the full picture. The real truth: no theory explains everything. Every theory answers some questions, but none solve the entire puzzle. Pilot action doesn't explain government contradictions. Hijacking doesn't explain the controlled turns. Mechanical failure doesn't explain the silence. Fire doesn't explain the long flight. Military shootdown doesn't explain the debris patterns. Diego Garcia doesn't explain the satellite arcs. Cyber hijack doesn't explain radar movements. Every answer raises another question. And maybe that's why MH370 remains unsolved. The disappearance of flight MH370 is more than a tragedy. It is a wound one carried by families, pilots, investigators, and everyone who searched the seas for answers that never came. A plane vanished, a signal faded, and 239 lives were lost without a trace. Something happened that night. Something unexpected, something devastating, or something hidden far beyond public reach. No debris field was ever found. No final message was ever recovered. No truth was ever confirmed. Only three things are certain. The plane took off. The plane changed direction. The plane never came home. The rest remains a shadow in the sky. This is the dark history case. And this was the mystery of MH370, the plane that vanished without a trace.